The clouds hung heavy in the sky, dark and thick like a warning. The wind blew cold across the rocky ground, carrying the smell of rain and old metal. Jack Walker, a human scavenger, moved slowly across the dead wasteland. His boots crunched against broken glass and dry dirt as he scanned the area for anything useful. He had been walking for hours with nothing but silence around him. No life, no machines, no signs of hope, just silence. But then he heard it, a sound soft and weak, like a whisper carried by the wind. It wasn't the wind, it was a voice crying for help. Jack froze. He turned his head toward the sound, his heart beating faster. He wasn't supposed to find anyone out here, not after the planet-wide evacuation. He reached for his old plasma rifle and started moving toward the voice, slowly and carefully. The sky above rumbled with thunder, and cold drops of rain began to fall. The cry came again, closer this time, and more desperate. He walked over a small hill and saw it. A broken escape pod lay half buried in the mud, its hatch blown open, smoke rising from its side. Lying just outside the wreck, barely moving, was a figure. A woman, but not human. Her skin was pale lavender, glowing slightly. Her long hair was silver and tangled, sticking to her wet face. Her body was shaking, arms wrapped around a swollen belly. She was pregnant, and she was in pain. Jack rushed forward, his weapon forgotten. She opened her eyes as he knelt beside her. Her eyes were large, golden, and filled with fear. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak. Her words in a language Jack didn't understand. Still, he didn't need words to see what was happening. She was close to collapsing. "Don't move," Jack said gently. Pulling off his jacket and placing it over her, she winced and cried out. Clutching her belly tighter, the rain came harder now, soaking them both as the thunder cracked above. Jack knew she wouldn't survive out here, not like this. He looked around, then made a choice. He lifted her carefully in his arms. She was light, far lighter than a human woman. She gasped and tried to push him away, but she was too weak. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jack whispered. He didn't know if she could understand. But after a moment, she stopped struggling. Jack carried her through the wind and rain, across the rocky ground toward his old shelter. It was a small cabin hidden deep in the valley, left behind from his days in the Resistance. It wasn't much, but it had heat, water, and supplies. It would have to be enough. By the time they reached the cabin, her skin was cold to the touch. He kicked open the door and carried her to the bed. Laying her down gently, she curled into herself, trembling, still holding her belly. Jack moved quickly, starting a fire and wrapping her in blankets. She opened her eyes again and looked around the small room, still afraid, still unsure, but not screaming. He brought her warm water, and she took small sips with shaking hands. Then she leaned back and whispered something. Her voice cracked and quiet. He didn't understand. But it didn't matter. Her pain said everything. Suddenly, the power flickered, and the cabin's old alarm system beeped. Jack looked at the panel. Something had triggered the outer sensors. He rushed to the window and peered through the rain. There was movement outside, small and fast. "Mechanical drones, damn it," Jack muttered, grabbing his rifle again. He looked back at the alien woman, who now looked terrified, her glowing eyes wide, her hands shaking more than ever. "They're looking for you, aren't they?" he asked. She nodded slowly, then clutched her belly again and cried out in pain. Jack had no time to think. He opened the hidden trapdoor under the bed and helped her slide into the basement. "I'll come back for you," he said, closing the hatch as the door alarm blared louder. Outside, 2 black surveillance drones hovered over the cabin, scanning for heat signatures. Jack stepped outside, face stern, weapon ready. The rain poured down on him as lightning split the sky. He fired once, destroying the first drone. The second darted away into the clouds, escaping before he could hit it. He stood there, soaked and shivering, heart pounding. Who was this alien woman, and why were machines hunting her on an abandoned world? And more importantly, what kind of child was growing inside her? Jack looked up at the gray sky. He knew this was just the beginning. Asterisk, the storm had not stopped. Lightning still flashed across the sky as the alien woman lay hidden beneath the floor. Jack stood by the window with his rifle in hand, eyes sharp, heart racing. His old cabin creaked from the wind outside, but it had survived worse. And tonight, it had to survive again. The last drone had escaped. Jack knew that meant more would come. Someone out there was searching for her, the pregnant alien woman. He had just saved, but why? And what kind of danger had he just brought to his doorstep? Down in the basement, the woman was shivering. Jack opened the trapdoor carefully and climbed down with a small lantern. Her skin was still damp and cold, her eyes half closed. She looked weak, like she hadn't eaten in days. He placed the lantern nearby, then knelt beside her. "I don't know who you are," he whispered, "but you're not safe out there." She blinked at him slowly. Then, from under the blanket, she pulled out a small metallic disc and pressed a glowing symbol. A soft robotic voice echoed from it. Was a translator device. Name: Lyra. The voice said slowly, broken but clear pain. Growing, Jack looked at her belly. Her pregnancy was far along. He could see movement under the skin. Something kicked, hard. Lyra cried out and clutched her stomach. Jack helped her sit up, supporting her back with a pillow. "You need medical help," he said. Lyra shook her head. "No hospital." The translator echoed. "They find me. Take child." "Who?" Jack asked, his voice low. Lyra hesitated, her golden eyes full of fear. "Facility," she whispered. "Experiment." Jack didn't need more. He had heard stories about alien breeding labs hidden far from public eyes, cruel places where hybrids were created, tested, and destroyed. And now one of their victims was in his cabin, carrying a child they wanted erased. "You escaped," he said slowly. Lyra nodded. "Crash. Escape pod. Child. Half human. They call abomination." Jack stood and began pacing. His brain raced with questions. Was the child his? Someone else's? How did this even happen? But those answers didn't matter right now. She was hunted, she was pregnant, and she was in pain. That was enough. Suddenly, a loud rumble echoed through the valley, not thunder this time. Engines. Jack ran upstairs and looked through the scope of his rifle. A low-flying patrol craft passed overhead, scanning the ground with blue searchlights. It moved slowly, then turned away, disappearing into the clouds. "They're close," Jack muttered. He went back down and sat beside Lyra. "You can't stay here long," he said, "but tonight, you rest." She looked into his eyes and nodded, a tear running down her cheek. Later, after the storm eased, Jack lit a fire and warmed soup on the small stove. He brought a bowl to Lyra and sat beside her. She sipped carefully, her hands still shaking. Then, through the translator, she spoke again. "You, kind. Not like others." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What others?" he asked. Lyra looked away. "Human soldiers. Helped build facility. Traded us for tech." Jack clenched his fists. He had fought in wars, worn a uniform. Pa never did that. Still, the shame of what others had done burned inside him. "Not all humans are monsters," he said, "and not all aliens are threats." Lyra replied softly. That night, Jack gave Lyra his bed and stayed by the fire. Rifle close. Outside, the wind howled and wolves cried in the distance. But inside, the small cabin felt different. It felt like something new was beginning, not just a fight for survival, but something more. As Jack sat in silence, he heard a gentle sound. A lullaby, soft and ancient. He turned his head toward the trapdoor. Lyra was singing to her unborn child in her native tongue. It was haunting, beautiful, and full of sadness. Jack closed his eyes. He didn't know what would happen tomorrow. But for now, he had made his choice. He would protect her. He would protect the child, no matter who came looking. The morning came, but the clouds never cleared. The sky still hung low and gray. Hiding the sun behind a heavy blanket inside the cabin, Jack moved silently. Checking the power system and sealing the windows, Lyra was resting now, her breath steady, but her body still weak. The baby inside her kicked often, like it knew danger was coming. Jack stood by the window. Gripping his old binoculars, he hadn't slept all night. His eyes scanned the horizon for anything strange, anything too quiet. Then he saw just a flicker in the clouds, a sleek, silver shape cutting through the gray sky like a blade. His stomach tightened. The patrol ship had returned. But this time, it wasn't alone. 3 drones flew beside it, black, silent, and fast. They circled above the valley. Scanning the land with blue light beams, Jack ducked, pulled the curtain shut, and moved quickly to the basement. He opened the hatch and climbed down where Lyra lay resting. "Wake up," he whispered. Gently shaking her shoulder, she stirred. Blinking up at him with confusion, "They're back," Jack said, "and they've brought more." Lyra's face lost all color. She sat up slowly, placing both hands on her belly. "They want the child," she said through her translator, her voice trembling. Jack nodded. "I won't let them take you," he said. "But I need answers, real ones." Lyra looked down for a moment, then spoke slowly. "I was a servant," she said. "In their breeding division." Jack stiffened, but didn't interrupt. "They took DNA from soldiers," she continued, "from prisoners, even dead humans. Mixed it with ours." Jack's jaw tightened. "You didn't choose this," he said quietly. "No," Lyra whispered, "but this child. This child feels different." She reached out and took Jack's hand, placing it on her belly. He expected fear, confusion, maybe sadness, but what he felt was a powerful kick, strong, determined, like life itself refused to give up. Suddenly, a sharp beep echoed from upstairs. The motion sensor. Jack stood fast, grabbing his weapon. "Stay here," he said, closing the hatch behind him. Back in the main room, he moved to the window again. Now one of the drones was right above the cabin, its blue light sweeping across the roof. Jack cursed under his breath. He grabbed a signal jammer from the shelf. It's one of the few pieces of tech he still had from his resistance days. He turned the dial and activated it. The jammer pulsed, sending out static interference. The drone buzzed and spun, confused by the signal. Then, without warning, it fired a small blast toward the cabin. The wall cracked, sparks flew, and Jack ducked behind the kitchen table. He rolled, aimed, and took the shot. His plasma round hit the drone dead center, sending it crashing into the side of the hill. Silence returned, but not for long. The patrol ship had seen the shot. Jack's signal was now lit like a beacon. He ran to the basement and opened the hatch. "They know we're here," he said, out of breath. Lyra sat up, eyes wide with panic. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They'll burn everything to find us. Then we don't let them." Jack replied, "We need to run." But Lyra shook her head. "No," she said, "too late for running." She reached into the folds of her clothes and pulled out a glowing crystal. Jack blinked, recognizing it from old tech reports. It was a memory shard. Alien tech used to store biological data. "This," she said, "is the child signal." "What?" "They track." Jack stared at it, then suddenly grabbed it. He wrapped it in a thick metal cloth and shoved it inside the microwave. Then turned it on. The signal would be scrambled. "For now, you really are smart," he said with a small smile, but there was no time to celebrate. From the window, he saw the ship beginning to descend, wings spread wide, engines roaring louder. As it neared the ground, Lyra struggled to stand, and Jack helped her up. "We need a new plan," he muttered, "and we need it fast." Then, something happened neither of them expected. The baby inside Lyra suddenly let out a bright pulse of light glowing through her skin like a flare. Jack stumbled back, stunned. What the hell was that? He gasped. Lyra stared at her stomach in shock. I don't know," she said, breathless. "That's never happened before." Outside, the ship froze in midair. Its lights blinked, its engines stuttered, and then, without warning, pulled away and vanished into the clouds. Silence fell again. Jack and Lyra exchanged a long look. "What did your baby just do?" Jack asked quietly. I think he scared them," she whispered. Jack swallowed hard. Something told him that baby wasn't just special. It might be powerful enough to change everything. The rain had finally stopped, but the valley was soaked in fog, thick like smoke, making it hard to see anything more than a few meters ahead. Inside the small wooden cabin, Jack sat at the table, staring at the translator disc lying between them. The machine sparked softly, a tiny crack running across its surface. "It's broken," he muttered, rubbing his forehead. Lyra watched silently, her golden eyes filled with concern. She opened her mouth and spoke in her own tongue, melodic, breathy language. Jack didn't understand a single word. He raised his hands and shook his head. "No good," he said. "We can't talk." Lyra frowned. She looked around, then slowly reached for the knife on the table. Jack tensed, but she didn't point it at him. Instead, she leaned down and started drawing on the wooden floor with the knife's tip. She drew a circle, then a figure. Inside it, with stars above, Jack leaned in, watching carefully. "That's you," he guessed, pointing at the figure. She nodded, then tapped her stomach and drew another figure, smaller one, inside the first. "The baby," he whispered. Then she paused, looked at him with nervous eyes, and drew something else, a third figure, larger, darker, with claws. Behind its fire, Jack's face hardened. "The one's hunting you," he said slowly. She nodded again, her expression growing grim. Then she placed her hand over the baby drawing, then tapped his chest. Jack stared at her. She was trying to say something big. "You want me to protect him?" She shook her head gently, then touched her heart and touched his again. Jack blinked. Was she saying the child was his? A silence fell between them. The fire in the corner crackled softly. Jack leaned back and sighed. He didn't know how much of it he understood. But it didn't matter now. There was no one else, just them. And whatever this child was, it had already made enemy ships retreat. Suddenly, a noise outside. Not loud, but heavy. A footstep, maybe two. Jack stood quickly and grabbed his rifle. Motioning for Lyra to stay low, he stepped outside the cabin door. The fog made everything ghostly and white. Then movement near the tree line. Someone was out there, tall, broad, armored. Jack ducked behind a rain barrel, steadying his aim. The figure stepped forward, an alien soldier, tall as a doorframe, wearing black armor marked with red lines. Its face was hidden behind a breathing mask, and in its hand was a scanner, glowing faint blue. It was looking for her. Jack cursed under his breath. This wasn't a drone. Neat was a tracker, a ground hunter. The kind they sent when they really wanted someone found. The tracker moved toward the cabin, scanning the ground. Jack waited, his finger tight on the trigger, heart racing. But before he could shoot, another bright pulse flashed from the cabin window. The tracker froze. Its scanner started to blink rapidly, then smoke, sparks, and the machine in its hand exploded. The tracker fell to its knees, howling in pain through its mask. It scrambled to its feet and ran off into the fog. Vanishing between the trees, Jack stared in shock. He turned and looked at the cabin through the window. Lyra stood with one hand over her belly, her face pale, her breath heavy. She looked like she'd just been struck by lightning. Jack rushed back inside. She collapsed into his arms, sweating. "And weak, the baby," he whispered. "Did he do that again?" Lyra nodded slowly. Eyes fluttering, the translator sparked once more, and a single word slipped out, barely audible: awakening. Then the light inside the cabin dimmed. The generator flickered. Jack laid her gently on the couch and wrapped her in a blanket. The baby inside her was not just alive, it was growing fast. He touched her forehead, brushing back her damp silver hair. "You're burning up," he said softly. "We need help, but no one out here's going to save us." He stood and looked at the broken translator again, then made a decision. There was an abandoned science outpost 2 days north of the valley. If the solar panels were still working, maybe he could find something: medical gear, food, tools to repair the translator, but the journey would be dangerous. And he couldn't leave Lyra alone for long. She grabbed his wrist weakly, whispering something in her language again. She didn't want him to go, but he had to. Jack leaned down and spoke gently. "I'll be back," he said. "I swear it." She closed her eyes and nodded slowly. He grabbed his coat, packed what little supplies he could carry, and looked back one last time. Lyra lay there, half-conscious, glowing faintly in the fading firelight, her hands still resting on her belly. And in that moment, Jack realized he wasn't just protecting them anymore. He belonged to them now. And whatever that baby truly was, the world wasn't ready for it. Jack moved fast. The wind whipped against his face as he followed the broken trail through the cliffs. In his pack was only a knife, a solar flashlight, and a small energy bar. He didn't bring much. There wasn't time. Back in the cabin, Lyra was growing weaker. Her skin was hot, glowing in places that didn't glow before. And her baby, their baby, was kicking like thunder inside her. Jack didn't know alien pregnancies, but he knew time was running out. The abandoned research mine lay beyond the ridge. It had once been used to dig up exotic minerals used for alien tech medicine. That was his goal now, a rare mineral Lyra had drawn for him on the wooden floor. It looked like a crystal that pulsed with blue light. He had seen it once, long ago. When he served during a medical supply run, it was rare but not impossible. He reached the cave entrance just as the sun tried to cut through the gray sky, but the light barely reached the rocks. The mine yawned open before him, dark, cold, and silent. Jack stepped inside. Each footstep echoed like a warning. He turned on the solar flashlight, its beam cutting through the dust. Webs stretched across broken beams, and rusted tools lay scattered like bones. But then he saw it, a faint glow deep in the tunnel. Blue and soft, pulsing gently. Jack smiled with hope and stepped forward too quickly. Snap, a sound behind him. Not from his feet. He spun around, weapon raised, but nothing, only shadows. Then something crashed into him, a heavy body, a claw. Jack slammed into the wall, pain shooting through his ribs. He rolled away and looked up, eyes wide. It was a hunter. Not a drone, not a tracker. This was a full enforcer, tall, armored in bone-white plates. Eyes glowing red through a half mask. It held a long staff tipped with an energy blade, the same crest marked its chest, same as the ship from before. "You've been warned, human." It growled in perfect English. "The facility does not allow errors to survive." Jack stood, chest heaving. "She's not an error," he said. "Okay. She's a person carrying life." The hunter hissed. "That life is illegal." It replied, stepping closer. "A failed merge, a corrupted project. You should have turned her in." Jack's grip tightened on his blade. "Guess I'm just bad at following rules," he snapped. The hunter lunged. Jack dodged. Barely missing the energy tip, he slashed with his own knife. cutting through part of the mask. The alien staggered but didn't fall. It roared and knocked Jack down with one brutal hit. Jack hit the rocks hard, blood filling his mouth, his vision blurred. But he forced himself up. The glowing crystal was just behind the hunter. If he could get to a tiff, he could distract him. He had one chance. He pulled a flare from his jacket, lit it, and threw it past the alien. The sudden burst of red light made the hunter flinch. Just for a moment, Jack rushed forward, slamming into the alien's chest and knocking it off balance. The two crashed to the ground in a pile of rock and dust. Jack rolled away and grabbed the glowing mineral worm, pulsing, alive, the moment he touched it. A strange vibration ran up his arm, like it knew what it was for. The hunter rose again. Furious, blade humming. But Jack didn't wait. He grabbed a broken power pipe from the wall and swung it like a club. The pipe cracked across the hunter's mask, breaking it completely. Sparks flew and the alien screamed, blinded by broken circuitry. Jack lunged and drove his blade into its side. Deep, the hunter fell with a final gasp. Jack collapsed beside it, chest heaving, arms shaking, blood trickled down his face. But he clutched the glowing crystal like it was life itself. He had one, but barely. He staggered out of the mine hours later, barely walking, his clothes torn, hands scraped raw. But in his pack was the mineral Lyra needed. He looked up at the cloudy sky and whispered, "Hold on, Lyra." By the time he reached the valley, night had fallen again. The cabin stood quiet in the fog, but something inside felt strange. He opened the door and froze. Lyra was on the floor, moaning. Her water had broken. Jack rushed to her side. She grabbed his shirt, breathing hard, tears in her glowing eyes. "You came back," she whispered weakly. He nodded, placing the crystal in her hand. "I always will," he said, outside. The wind howled. Inside, life was about to begin, but no one knew what kind of child would take its first breath beneath this cloudy, alien sky. Lyra screamed. Her body shook as pain surged through her. She lay on the cabin floor, her hands clutching her swollen belly. Sweat running down her face like rain. Jack knelt beside her, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth, his heart pounding louder than the storm outside. "You're doing great," he whispered, though fear crept into his voice he had never delivered. A baby not human and definitely not alien, but he couldn't panic. Lyra was all alone, and she needed him. She gripped his hand tightly, almost crushing it. The glow under her skin grew brighter with each contraction. Golden light pulsed from her chest, her arms, her belly, and then everything stopped. For one long second, there was silence. No wind, no pain, no movement. Just a deep calm. Like the universe holding its breath. Then the child was born. The cry was soft. Yet it echoed through the cabin like music. Jack stared, stunned. The baby wasn't like anything he had seen. It had soft skin like Lyra, faintly lavender. But its eyes were bright silver, glowing even in the dim light. It looked at Jack, blinking slowly, not crying, not afraid, just watching. Jack swallowed, his hands shaking as he wrapped the child in a blanket. Lyra reached out weakly, her face pale, tears in her eyes. She held her baby close and whispered something in her native language. The translator lay broken nearby. Useless. But Jack didn't need to understand the words. He saw it in her face. Love, relief, and something else. Pride. Then the baby did something no one expected. It lifted its tiny hand, pointed toward the cracked window, and released a small spark of light. The spark floated to the glass. Touched, it tanned, the shattered crack vanished. The window repaired itself, clean and smooth again. Jack's mouth dropped open. "What the hell?" he whispered. Lyra looked up, weak but smiling. She touched Jack's hand and placed it gently on the baby's chest. A pulse ran through him, warmth, calm, and something he couldn't describe, like touching hope itself. This baby. He began, but couldn't finish. Suddenly, the old monitor on the wall lit up. A warning flashed across it. Long-range signal detected. Jack rushed over. Eyes wide, the facility ship was back. But this time, it wasn't alone. Multiple crafts closing in fast. Jack turned back to Lyra. "We have to move," he said. Now, but Lyra shook her head, too weak to stand. The child looked at Jack again, and this time he felt it inside his mind. A voice, not words, but a thought. "Protect her." Jack blinked, stunned. "Was that you?" he asked out loud, looking at the infant. The baby turned its head and raised one small hand again, and in that moment, every power source in the cabin surged. The fire roared, lights flared, and the signal screen exploded in sparks. Outside, the ships that had been approaching suddenly stopped. Engines sputtered, metal groaned. Then all 4 ships fell from the sky, crashing into the hills with massive thuds. Jack stood frozen. He looked down at the newborn again. This wasn't just a child. This was a being, something new, something powerful. Born from human and alien blood, a mix they had called an error, a mistake, a failure. But now, it had turned weapons away, shut down tracking systems, and protected its mother, all without leaving the blanket. Jack knelt beside Lyra and the baby. "What is he?" he whispered, almost in awe. Lyra looked at him and said one word, her voice weak but clear. "Hope." Jack nodded slowly. "Yeah, that felt right." He stood. Locking the door and grabbing supplies from the closet, they had to leave the cabin. Now that the ships were down, others would come. He gently lifted Lyra in one arm, the baby in the other. "Hang on," he said softly. "We're not safe yet, but I'll get you somewhere we can be." As he stepped outside into the night, the clouds began to shift. A single beam of starlight broke through for the first time in days, and under that light, the baby opened his silver eyes again. Jack felt no fear, only something he hadn't felt in years, a reason to fight. The forest was quiet now. Only the soft hum of insects and the distant rustle of wind through the trees remained. Jack walked slowly, carefully holding the newborn child against his chest. Lyra rested on his back, strapped into a makeshift carrier he had crafted from blankets and belts. Her breathing was steady, but her body was still weak. They had left the cabin behind just before dawn. Smoke from the fallen ships still curled in the distance, marking the wreckage, whatever the baby had done. Whoever it had scared away, they weren't coming back right now. But Jack knew the peace wouldn't last. Others would come, curious, afraid, or worse. That's why they were heading north to the last place he had sworn never to return, the Resistance Sanctuary. Deep in the mountains, hidden by old cloaking, tech and nature itself, he had buried that life years ago. But now, for Lyra and the child, he would open those old doors again. It took 2 days to reach the cliffs. By then, Jack's boots were torn, and Lyra had only whispered a few soft words. But the baby, he never cried, never screamed. He only looked at the world with wide, silver eyes, calm and quiet. Sometimes he reached out toward the sky, and birds circled above. Other times, when Lyra's pain returned, the baby touched her skin. The pain faded. Jack had seen a lot of strange things in the galaxy, but nothing like this. On the 3rd night, they made it. A large cave near the frozen river, hidden behind vines and stone. Jack pressed his hand against a rusted panel on the rock wall. It blinked red, then green. The old door hissed open. They stepped into silence. The air inside was stale, but the power still worked. Old lights flickered to life one by one. Jack set Lyra on a soft cot, then lit a fire in the center chamber. The room warmed slowly. Chasing away the cold, he sat beside her, feeding her broth from a pouch. She drank slowly, then looked down at the child in his arms. The baby reached out, touching her cheek with tiny fingers. She smiled, weak but full of love. "What now?" Jack asked aloud, though mostly to himself. They couldn't run forever. And the child was growing fast, faster than any human or alien child should. Already his eyes showed understanding, awareness, as if he knew more than he should that night. Jack found an old recorder in the sanctuary's armory. He wiped the dust off and sat down. The baby in his lap, the machine blinked, waiting. He looked at the child, then spoke. "Name, File 1, he said. "Subject, child born of Lyra of the Valari and Jack Walker of Earth. "Status, alive, healthy, gifted." He paused, then smiled softly. "Name, Hope." The recorder beeped and saved the file. Jack turned it off and looked down at the child. Again, Hope blinked slowly, then reached for the device and pressed a button. The light shut off completely. Jack stared. "You're learning already," he whispered. The child giggled. Just once a soft sound that made Lyra laugh quietly too. That sound filled the room with something it hadn't known in years. Peace. In the following days, Jack worked to repair the old tech. Solar panels were cleaned, water filters restarted, and the medical station powered on. Lyra grew stronger day by day. Her color returned, her steps steadied, and she started teaching Hope. Her language soft syllables that filled the rooms like lullabies. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lyra looked at Jack and said clearly, "You saved us." Jack looked at her, shaking his head. "No," he said softly, "you gave me a reason to live again." They watched the baby crawl across the floor, his tiny hands glowing faintly every time he touched the stone. Wherever he touched, moss grew, small green vines appeared where there had only been dust. Jack chuckled. "You're going to change the world, little guy." Lyra leaned against his shoulder and closed her eyes. "For the better," she whispered. As the stars rose above the valley, Jack stepped outside. Hope resting on his chest once again. The night air was clear. The first time in weeks without clouds. He looked up, breathing deeply. He had once thought he was just a man hiding from his past. But now he was something more. A protector, a father, and maybe a beginning. The galaxy would come one day. Questions would be asked. Battles might return. But tonight, beneath the quiet stars, they were a family. And for the first time in his life, Jack felt truly at home.